Well, the snow has come as predicted, and quite a bit of it. It's snowing pretty good here in Anchorage, out in the valley also. And that's what they said. They told us yesterday that we would get snow starting yesterday afternoon to Saturday morning. So thus far, they're spot on with their predictions. And that's good news. I like the snow. It's purdy, as we used to say down south. Temperatures have risen considerably from yesterday, where it is now 19 in Anchorage, 18 in Wasilla, 18 in Palmer, 25 in Girdwood. It's Dan Fagan here on KOAN, KVNT, streaming live all across the interweb on danfagan.us. My telephone number is 569-1080, 569-1080. There was I'm not really a comic book dude, and I'm not really into sci-fi. I don't know. I just not interested in any of that. But there was a thing with Superman where there was Bizarro World, where everything was upside down. And watching the gavel to gavel thing, or whatever they call it now, North 360, they've changed the name on it, of Governor's speech, his budget speech, and then the Republican response and the Democratic response. It seemed like everything was upside down. Let me state emphatically to you this morning that I am pretty sure that I saw something that I never thought I would see in my lifetime, which is a governor call for a cut in education spending. I was floored. It is one of the most courageous things. Now, this is a low bar, keep in mind, but it's one of the most courageous things I've ever seen a politician do. Bill Walker called for a 2.5% cut to education. Listen, folks, let me tell you how the world of education spending works. You pile heaps and heaps of cash on the monopoly every year. And then if you have a 15% increase one year, and then next year you only have a 10% increase, then they'll call that a cut. And the media will report it as, well, 5% cut in education. No, it was only a 10% increase in education this year over last. That's how skewed this whole thing is. What Walker called for last night, Governor Walker, was a legitimate 2.5% cut in education, meaning we're going to spend less on education this year over next, or next year over next. That is amazing. Now, normally, if a Republican were to propose something like that, Democrats would turn into flesh-eating zombies and begin to attack the Republicans as children haters. I watched the Democratic response last night. Berta Gardner, Les Guerra, Chris Tuck, these guys. I'm thinking, they're going to rip Walker to shreds. Not a peep. It's Bizarro World. What is going on? Then the Republican response. Kevin Meyer, and I'm quoting, "I'm very disappointed in the governor over the education cuts." Something to that effect. Are you kidding me? Let me just state to you in very clear terms that I believe the problem with the education monopoly and bureaucracy in this state is not a lack of money. We spend almost twice as much per student as any other state. We spend $2.1 billion educating 120,000 kids, and the results are dismal. Every year for the last 25 years, we've been told we need to throw more money at the problem, and we've done that year after year after year, and we've gotten worse results every year. That is not opinion. That is fact. And I understand in talk radio, there are a lot of opinions given. What I just stated to you was fact. We are dead bottom of the list when it comes to achievements in the benchmark categories. I don't know what it is: fourth grade reading, seventh grade math. I don't know what they are, but we're way, very, 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 very low on the bottom when it comes to results in those key testing areas. And I think there's one school district that spends more on one state that spends more on education than kids than Alaska does. I don't know which one it is. The average student cost per student per state is about $9,000. We spend $17,000. So it's not quite twice as much, but it's pretty close. And for a governor to say I'm going to cut education 2.5%. I wanted to get on a plane and fly down to Juneau and fall down on my knees and kiss Mr. Walker's feet before the speech was over. Now, for some reason, and I don't know what's going on here, the Democrats have decided that Bill Walker can do no wrong. So that makes me very suspicious. They will not criticize him, even though he is touching their holy grail. Most Democrats would never have a chance, you realize, of getting elected if it was not for the teachers union. So that's their master, the Democrats. The teachers union is their master. And the teachers unions are the architect of the philosophy that says throw more money at the problem. So I don't know what's going on. I'm very disappointed in Kevin Myers saying he was disappointed in Governor Walker. Now, I tend to look at Mr. Meyer as a very, fair-minded, decent fella. And I don't know if his staff told him to say that, or why would you ever be disappointed if a politician has the courage to take some money away from the teachers union? Well, I don't understand that at all. So that maybe gives us some insight into what really Mr. Meyer really does to believe. And maybe he thinks that it is a good idea to throw gobs and gobs of cash every year at the education monopoly. And maybe that's his worldview. And if it is, that's fine. I don't want to question his character. That's just his worldview. I don't know. I don't understand that question or that comment that he's disappointed in Governor Walker. But look, I will admit to you, as I watch the Walker tightrope walk unfold, I am trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm looking for ways to say, I like that, I agree with you on that. And I will tell you, having the audacity to cut education is absolutely something that I never thought I'd see a governor do. We'll continue on this, talking about the governor's speech last night. 6:14, Dan Fagan. Yeah, this is a big deal. Bill Walker proposing cutting education. He is, I'll tell you, Dan Fagan here, by the way, on KOAN, KVNT, streaming danfagan.us. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. That's the number. We'd love to hear from you. I know it's early. You can make a phone call. The big draw for Walker for some of my conservative friends who voted for him was that at least he'll cut the budget. And, I'm thinking to myself, what? He's got Vince Beltrami with him. He's got Byron Malott there. He surrounded himself with leftists, and what do you know, man? He comes out and proposes this. Now, is it sincere? Is it real? I don't know. All we can do is take the man at his word at this point. But I'll tell you, I was very encouraged at the speech last night. Now, obviously, the Medicaid expansion is a disaster. It's an embracing of Obamacare. It's trusting that the federal government will be solvent and be able to continue to pay for all these new dependents. To expand Medicaid, you have to embrace the welfare state. You really do. You just have to say it's good to have people dependent on government, able-bodied people. And that's really what this expansion is. It's an embracing of Obamacare. It's an embracing of the welfare state. And it's very disappointing. Now, I'll tell you, in defense of Mr. Walker, he strikes me as a single-minded guy. And we still haven't seen what he's going to do with this gas pipeline. I don't know that he gets embroiled in some of these peripheral issues. And I'm just totally speculating now. And if you surround yourself with a bunch of socialists who like the entitlement culture and promote the welfare state, they're going to tell you the expanding Medicaid and expanding Obamacare is the greatest thing since sliced bread. So in Mr. Walker's defense, he may have bought into that. But that was disappointing. The idea that the federal government is going to pay for 100% of it now, and then eventually we're going to start paying more and more of it. Well, eventually we're going to end up with 100% of the bill because the federal government's out of money. It's $18 trillion in debt. And yet we're creating all these dependents. So it's going to be a heavy burden to the state. Simple math tells you that. I did like that Mr. Obama or Mr. Walker is there's no Freudian slip there. Mr. Walker is not going to borrow the money to put down on the Persian Turks. He's just going to spend it. I like that idea too. He said he didn't want to put that on the backs of the next generation. We shouldn't be borrowing money right now, not with things as tight as they are. Is it wrong? Is it wrong for me to kind of taking some pleasure in the fact that the price of oil is so low and that it's forcing state leaders to grow up? Does that make me anti-Alaskan? Because if it does, I'm sorry, because that's where I am right now. I really like the idea that we're talking about cutting education. I really do. And you say, Dan, are you anti-education? Well, of course not. But the system that we have adopted here in Alaska, which is spearheaded by the teachers union that says throw more cash at it, please don't look at our results, will never work. And it is insatiable. And it will keep growing and growing and growing. It's like a cancerous tumor. You got to cut it off. It's not going to die by itself. So I think there's some real positive things coming out of this. And to have Governor Bill Walker say, I want to cut education spending by 2.5%. Oh, my goodness. Here's what Anna McKinnon, she used to be Anna Fairclough from Eagle River, said. She said Walker has taken a courageous first step. She praised him for putting things on the table that are going to be hard to talk about. I agree, Miss Fairclough McKinnon. Senate President Kevin Meyer described feeling a little disappointment when hearing Walker describe the budget cuts. Are you kidding me? Whose side are you on? I think Kevin Meyer may be our John Boehner. I don't know, or our Mitch McConnell. I'm a little worried there. He's a nice fella, good family man, all that. Some people don't get conservative thought. They just aren't conservatives. They don't understand supply side economics. They don't understand the larger the government, the smaller the individual. They just don't get that. And so when they don't govern with what you and I understand as, conservatism. They've never read Thomas Sowell. They've never understood Charles Krautheimer. They don't listen to Dennis Prager. So I don't blame, John Boehner's and Mitch McConnell's and Kevin Myers for being establishment Republicans. They kind of like the principles of small government, but it's not really a conviction deep in their heart. Maybe I'm wrong there. Now, Mike Dunleavy, he gets it. He called Walker's proposal a good start, but he said he'd like to see more, and I agree with Dunleavy. I'd like to see a huge increase in cuts. Among the departments facing the deepest cuts of 10% or more were the Department of Labor and Workforce Development and the Department of Commerce, Community and Economic Development. Good. Yeehaw. Now, Steve Thompson, Fairbanks, I never met this fellow. He says we need to start looking at new taxes. Walker said we may have to look at them starting next year. Man, don't listen. Let me just ask my fellow Alaskans a favor. Don't buy that. Our government's it's not 4 times the size it should be, but it's much bigger than it should be. Don't let them come after you to pay for their foolishness. Don't let them convince you that there's no fat left on the budget. Just 2 years ago, we were flying people to the Great Alaska Shootout, hoping they would attend, giving them free airline tickets. Come on now. We haven't even started to cut yet. We're just talking about it. And here's Steve Thompson from Fairbanks saying, well, we got to get taxes going. Let's get these taxes going. You understand, ladies and gentlemen, there are people in government, politicians who are elected to office, whose main focus is one thing: transfer money from the private sector to the government sector, because all good things come from government. That's their main focus. They look through every issue through that prism. They are always going to be wanting to transfer money out of the private sector into the government sector. Every time, it's always their answer, no exceptions. And they will push for it. They will use global warming as an excuse. They'll use the education testing as an excuse. Whatever they have to, we need more money to fight crime. They will come up with a million excuses to push their number one agenda. They're so focused on it. And it is simply transfer money from the private sector to the government sector. The reason they do that is because it enhances their power. And it actually is what their worldview is, too. I'm not saying they're bad people. They truly, honestly believe all good things come from government. The private sector can't be trusted. The business owner is greedy. So you have to take power from the business owner, the entrepreneur, and put it into their hands. And they'll make sure everybody gets equal. Equality above all. Now, Bill Walker also talked about revenue sharing. This is huge. Let me just tell you about revenue sharing. There are many communities in our state that would just die up and dry if it was not for revenue sharing. Literally would just shut down. I don't know if that's a bad thing. If you live in a community where there's no jobs, there's no hope to create wealth for you or your family, I don't know that that's a good thing, folks. I know that's a harsh thing to say. I know people get upset when you say that. Now, Walker is technically not going to end revenue sharing this year or next year. There's a fund that the money comes out of, and he'll continue to tap that fund for revenue sharing. It will be down $3 million over last year. They spent $57 million this year, and next year they'll spend $54 million. But when that fund runs out, then Mr. Walker says revenue sharing will end, unless, of course, the price of oil goes back up. It's some tough decisions. It's some hard choices. Every dollar that comes from government has a constituent. Everybody wants their piece of the pie. We had 16,000 employees under Murkowski, government employees, 16,000 government employees, state government employees under Murkowski. It went to 20,000 under Palin. We're at 24,000 now. You just can't continue that tidal wave. I know the unions like to have the big union dues roll into their big union coffers. We just can't continue it. We just can't. Do you care about our kids and grandkids? I mean, come on. Do you want your grandkids to be able to set up a life here, buy a house, get a job, plant themselves here? We just can't continue it. And the fact that we're having lower oil prices now, I think in many ways is a good thing, because we're all of a sudden looking at the reality of this behemoth, massive, gigantic government we've created in Alaska and saying, whoa, this thing's kind of expensive. It's like you just went out and bought a brand new car and you have a $850 car payment, and your boss just cut your payment, your salary 25%. You go, ooh, maybe I need to trade this car in. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. 569-1080. We have Dan Sullivan, the senator, U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan. He's going to be on the show. Also, State Representative Sharice Millett. Dan Fagan here on KOAN, KVNT. 569-1080. DanFagan.us is where we're streaming. All right, it's 25 minutes ahead of the hour here on Dan Fagan, KOAN, KVNT, streaming live, danfagan.us. And we are also taking your emails. Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. Give us a call if you'd like and let us know what's on your mind. Everybody's talking about, of course, inflate gate or uninflate, deflate gate. It's amazing how the media works these days. And look, here's my thought on it. Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that somebody deflated those 11 balls. Whether it was an equipment manager, whether it was Tom Brady, whether it was just someone sitting there going, hey, it's kind of cold today. Let me see what I can do. I don't know that Tom Brady was in on it. We'll never know, probably. Don't know if Belichick was in on it. We'll probably never know. But you always say follow the money. When you look at our scandal, follow the money. We can agree that this had no impact on the game. Zero.
Could have been the mob.
Could have been the mob. But we can agree there was no impact on the outcome of the game. So it did not taint the sport. Those of you who spent money gambling on the game were not affected.
None of the players noticed.
None of the players noticed. Everyone on the field played with the same ball at the same time. If it's easier to catch a deflated ball, then that's easier for the defensive backs to catch the deflated ball. So it's as though this is another Watergate, according to the media. And it's titillating. It's sensationalistic. Tom Brady is America's golden boy. To catch him doing something wrong is a big story. And that's the big thing with this whole deal. It's that it's something to talk about. It drives up the ratings. ESPN has hit the gold mine. We're coming up on the Super Bowl, and normally 2 weeks for the Super Bowl, you get the normal interviews and we're up for the game and we're excited. This has totally changed the landscape of the pre-Super Bowl scenario. And now all of a sudden, I will tell you, I went to ESPN.com 4 or 5 times yesterday to see if there was anything new on Inflategate. And normally I would not do that. So the media has a conflict of interest here. It's everywhere. O'Reilly, who I try to go and say, I don't normally watch it on TV, but I'll go to the Fox News and I'll get clips. And he was talking about it. Everybody's talking about it. So it's the media's making the most of it because it's about ratings for them. 569-1080. Well, look, talking about hypocritical. Look at me. I'm talking about 569-1080. Todd, what do you think?
Hey, good morning, Dan.
Morning.
You're talking about deflated balls, but I'd like to talk about the state legislature because I think they're connected.
I'm listening.
Just like throwing more money at education isn't going to solve the problem, giving education less money isn't going to solve the problem either.
How so?
The problem is the system.
Yeah.
And so this is just coming from someone who's been in a low achieving school for 2 decades.
Well,
the system is a problem, and when we had a chance to change it, Senator Dunleavy's proposals for education reform, the establishment Republicans in the state legislature didn't have enough air in their balls to actually hold firm and support him in his proposals, which is why he gave up most of them.
Can we agree on a couple things, though?
Yeah.
It was incredibly courageous from Governor Walker last night to say that he wants to cut education 2.5%.
Well, it's courageous to say things, but it's really courageous to do things.
I understand that, but even to say that, Todd, if Parnell came out and proposed a 2.5% cut in education, he'd be crucified. You know that.
Yeah, Yeah, well, he's definitely riding on, he's still riding on the euphoria of the Unity ticket.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's why, he's able to get away with that.
But is it? Now, I agree with you. Dunleavy's reform proposals are on the right track. I agree with you. It's about accountability. It's about choice and all that stuff. But it start with starving the beast, because what we've been doing for the last 25 years is no accountability, no choice, no competition. We just want more money. And if we can begin to at least reverse that strategy, isn't that a beginning of a beginning?
Well, you're starving the beast. You're not adding any accountability, and you've also taken away the accountability on the student and parent side by removing the high school qualifying exam. So I'm not exactly sure how this fixes the problem. I mean, I suppose that it could potentially highlight some inefficiencies, and when you just throw more money at an inefficiency, it's easy to cover it up. So, I mean, that's possible, but getting better outcomes, I don't think is necessarily going to result in reducing spending. I mean, just like it won't increase spending. Right now, the public education system is like asking a restaurant to provide meals from, Italian meals, Mexican meals, Chinese meals, Thai meals, all in the same building.
Yeah.
And there's inefficient. I mean, there's a reason why restaurants focus on one type of food.
Right.
And that's not, so the inefficiencies that are created by the system as we have it, with very little choice for parents and students, and very little competition, you can't fix it with money one way or the other, I don't think.
So more money or less money is not really the focus. It's changing the entire structure of education.
Well, yeah, I mean, unless there's going to be accountability on all parties involved in the process, and
what's the number one impediment? Where does that resistance come from? The accountability resistance.
I think it comes from the teachers union. I think it comes from some parents. I think it comes from administrators. I think there are people in all groups, in all stakeholder groups, that are very vocal that don't want accountability. Teachers and the teachers union, but there are administrators who, it's a numbers game for them. They want students to earn credit, and they want higher graduation rates. And they will lower expectations to do that, to get their numbers. And you have parents who just want their kids to be successful regardless of how much they're learning.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of stakeholder groups that are, people in every stakeholder group that's responsible for where we're at in education. So how do you fix that? Well, you give people, first of all, you put competition pressure on the provider, on the producer, and you give choice. So
I was giving Walker a lot of credit for even mentioning the idea of cutting education, but what really would have been courageous, in your opinion, is if he would have promoted choice and competition and accountability.
Yeah,
that would have been a firestorm of resistance.
Yeah, funding is 2.5%.
Yeah,
you can find 2.5%, in your car, in your ashtray,
under the couch cushion.
Really, I mean, 2.5% is nothing. That doesn't. No, I'm not ready to pat him on the back for courage. Now, if he wants to support Senator Dunleavy and promote some of the educational,
unfortunately, I got to go, Todd. Thank you. I appreciate
Bye.
it. We'll be back. All right, 647. Dan Fagan here on KOAN, KVNT. Our number 569-1080. 569-1080. That's the number, 569-1080. Give us a call. We're streaming live on danfagan.us, danfagan.us, and also you can email me, Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com, Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. Give us a call at 569-1080 again, as I said, 569-1080. Big speech last night from Bill Walker on the state of the budget, and he came out with what I thought was pretty commendable. By the way, Dan Sullivan, state senator or U.S. senator, will be joining us. So will State Senator Representative Millett. I thought it was pretty courageous for any politician to stand up at a podium and say, "I want to cut education." That was a pretty big deal, I thought. Now we heard from Todd, a caller, who said, "Well, you really want to get courageous, then say that you're for accountability and competition in the school district." And I agree with Todd. That would have brought on a major firestorm, no doubt about it. So it's one of those things where you just kind of hope that it's a start. I know this that if a Republican would have gotten out there and said, I'm going to cut education 2.5%, he'd have been crucified. He'd have been absolutely crucified. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, folks. I just know that we've got to do something. We got to stop throwing money at the problem. And frankly, I think I do know part of the answer, and I think Todd illustrated it perfectly. That we've got to bring competition. We've got to bring competition and accountability to the education bureaucracy. You can't spend almost twice as much on education as any other state and have the dismal results we have. You just can't do that. There's no excuse for that. And the bottom line is, we can fix this. But the teachers union, and frankly, even as Todd said, some parents, they just want their kids to get good grades. They're not so much concerned about learning. And I think parents today, some of them, they get so worked up about their kid's future in regard to college. And, will my kid do well in college? And will my kid get into the right college? And his grades are so important. He must get good grades now if he's going to, get into the right college. I just, sometimes I think we get all worked up about that over nothing. I mean, it's not parents listening to this, they're putting their hands over the ears of their kids in the car. But yeah, that's important, I suppose. But how about what you learn? How about what you actually take in the way of knowledge and information? It's not just about the grade. It's not just about your record. I remember when I went to school, and I just didn't absorb much when I was in school. I had 3 or 4 teachers that were absolutely amazing. I remember just about everything they taught me. And a lot of it was along the lines of history and that kind of stuff. I really enjoy that kind of, I just didn't care much about science or math. I didn't absorb much. Now, I've absorbed a lot as an adult. I've probably absorbed more information plus after school as an adult than most adults have. I spent most of my life trying to learn, so learning's awesome. I just think learning is the coolest thing in the world. And I'd like to see us maybe get into a system of education that really focuses on the beauty of learning, the joy of learning, teaching things that people are interested in, and let kids opt out of some stuff that just really doesn't matter. 569-1080. My mom told me the other day, or this was yesterday, my nephew, who's just like me. I have a nephew who's, I think, just a lot like me, unfortunately. But he was complaining to his mom about all the stuff they're teaching him that really just doesn't matter. And that's the way I was in school. It's like, show me why this is important, and then I'll dedicate everything I have to learning it. But otherwise, 569-1080, 569-1080. But I do credit Walker. I do credit Billy Walker, our governor, Mr. Bill Walker, for even having the audacity to suggest cutting 2.5% out of the budget. And I was very disappointed last night that State Senate President Kevin Meyer said he was disappointed in Walker for the cuts. Whose side is what? I mean, what's going on here? It's like bizarro world. 569-1080. 569-1080. Joe, you're on.
Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I am really glad that you're saying some good things about our new governor, and I've also read your comment on the ADN.
Yep.
And I want to take you back to the late 60s when I was a kid growing up here in Anchorage. We had no hot lunches. We had no school bus service. We walked 3/4 of a mile to school every day from Loose.
You sound like my dad, Joe. How old are you?
I'm 55 now.
Did you walk to school uphill on the way there and then uphill on the way back? Because that's what my dad did.
Actually, it was downhill on the way back.
Okay.
The native boy I walked to school with complained he was hungry. I says, hey, eat half of your lunch now.
Okay.
And at lunchtime, eat the other half of it. And we got by, But another thing I want to tell you is Alaska has had to absorb 20,000 illegal aliens, more than any other state per capita.
How many?
20,000.
Okay.
Approximately 20,000.
We had to absorb those.
Yeah, we had to. And
where'd you get that from?
It was a couple. The Mexican birth certificate thing.
Okay.
That was in the paper about a week ago. Remember that?
I didn't see that.
Well, it was about how easily people from Mexico can get their birth certificate without any chance of being deported.
Okay, gotcha.
Because of Obama's new immigration policy for people that have been here for 5 years without that are here illegally.
Okay.
And if they come forth with birth certificates, then they will not be picked on or deported.
Okay.
But anyhow, the state of Alaska and cutting the education, I think Walker may be the first governor ever to cut education.
I've never heard of politicians have say it. I've just never heard the words come out of their mouth. And I've covered legislatures in Texas and Louisiana and Alaska. And I've never heard a politician have the audacity to say it.
Well, when Anchorage school districts it was either $2 million or $20 million left over.
Yeah.
Then something is a little bit wrong. And they're not only feeding and clothing the kids.
Yeah.
But they're making their tests easier for different ethnicities. And
well, the Common Core, the plan that Jeb Bush favors, is literally has built in it different standards for different races, which is ridiculous.
And let me not forget that during the late 60s, Alaska, the state of Alaska, was up amongst the top on the nation in education.
When was this?
In the late 60s.
Wow. That's when the Democrats were in charge. See, that was what we need to go back to Democrats controlling the state, Joe. That's what we need. Governor
Egan was there.
There you go.
And so anyway, Kevin Meyer, for him to just turn around and do that. Kevin Meyer's seething because he lost his vote for Parnell, and he lost, and it's just like a little baby kid whining and he didn't get his way. So everything.
No, I don't think that's it. I think, and this is total speculation, I like Kevin Meyer personally. I think he's a statesman, he's a good guy, but I think that he is at his heart not a small government conservative. I don't think he gets conservative thought, and he genuinely believes that you should fund education to the max, and that the answer really is not accountability and competition. It's just more money. I don't want to speak for him, but when he says he's disappointed that Walker talked about cutting education, I don't know what else to conclude, Joe.
I know. You told it like it was, man. You weren't taking side. Your man lost, Parnell, but you still had something good to say about Walker. I know that might change a little here and there depending on the issue.
Well, I'm pulling for him, Joe.
Good.
Now, if he decides to raid the permanent fund and build the pipeline so his union buddies get all the jobs, that's gonna change everything.
I know.
So we'll see. Well, let's hope he does the right thing.
You bring Glenn around now.
Oh, all right, Joe. Thank you.
Bye.
Appreciate it. 569-1080. That's the number. 569-1080. Give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who's on line 2 there, Brian. Let me pull it up. It's okay. All right, we're gonna get the state representative Sharice Millett here at the top of the hour. She's gonna we'll get her reaction to the this big speech last night. I'll tell you, I'm impressed. I am absolutely impressed with Governor Walker. I'm the Medicaid expansion is heartbreaking. That was the one part of the speech that I found really sad because I'm pulling for the guy. Folks, I'm telling you, you may not believe me. Look, I voted for Parnell. I thought Sean Parnell did a great job. I thought Sean Parnell had us going in the right direction. But the reality of the situation is we have a new governor. And it's time for those of us who are disappointed in the outcome of the election to get over it and start pulling for the new leader. Now, if he starts making mistakes, we'll call him on it. But we should be pulling for him. 658, Dan Fagan here, 569-1080. Dan Sullivan, state U.S. Senators coming up. Also, State Representative Sharice Millett.
I'm not exactly sure how this.
All right, it's 6 minutes past 7 o'clock. Dan Fagan here on KOAN, KVNT. Temperatures 10 degrees, Anchorage, 9 in Palmer, 8 in Wasilla, 13 in Eagle River. Snow coming down today, as you well know, if you have windows in your home. It's supposed to snow most of today and through tomorrow morning. Several inches expected, as much as 13 up on the hillside. You're planning for your retirement. You're saving your money. You're working hard. You're playing by the rules, but there are things you can know that would help you have a more worry-free retirement, and that's what Mike Daniels and his team at Country Financial are all about. They have a big operation up here in Alaska. There are 13 different Country Financial branches here in Alaska, and they're the very best when it comes to helping you with financial planning. Mike Daniels and his team, you sit down with them for 10 minutes, and you begin to realize, wow, there's so much I don't know about planning for retirement, making sure I'm fully insured. All matters financial. Go see Mike Daniels and his team. Country Financial, the number 866-COUNTRY, 866-COUNTRY. Let's go down to Juneau, Alaska, where State Representative Cherise Millett is standing by. Representative Millett, how are you?
I'm good. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning to you, and I appreciate you getting up early. I knew you guys are very busy down there, but I will tell you, I was watching last night on the GCI cable channel where they broadcast the state of the budget. I almost fell out of my chair when I heard Bill Walker, our current governor, say that he was considering cutting education to the tune of 2.5%. Did you know that was coming? Did you hear anything, rumors about that? And when you heard it, what was your reaction?
I did not have any previous knowledge of that, but it was, he took some bold moves last night. I was incredibly impressed with his ability to, he talked about cuts across the board. Nothing was sacred. And sometimes when you're in a deficit like we are, those moves are hard to do as the leader of the state. So I was very impressed with his speech last night.
And it just seems like that's one of the topics you don't touch. You don't ever talk about cutting education. I was surprised to hear the Democrats at the press conference following the speech. They didn't bring it up. And then I was kind of disappointed. I was happy to hear Ms. Faircloth or Ms. McKinnon talk about it in favorable terms, but Kevin Meyer seemed to be disappointed in it. What's your personal reaction to the idea of even bringing up the topic of potentially trimming the education budget?
Well, I think our education budget has grown faster than the rate of inflation even, which is, a talking point you hear a lot from folks in the education industry, that, we haven't kept up with inflation, which actually we've exceeded the cost of inflation by a couple percentage points. So, it's a lot of, there's a lot of misconceptions about education funding out there. Last year we did, and I think that Senate President Meyer, made a good point of we took on education last year. We had a big education session. We came to the agreement in conference committee that we would increase the student-based allocation, $58. That's protected. That's in statute. That protection will be in place. So education, the base student allocation will go up. I believe it's $58 this year and $58 next year. Went up $100 last year. And so what I think Governor Walker is speaking of is the $100 million for the next 2 years outside the base student allocation that we had allocated and put aside for education funding, that he believes that money won't get expended.
So let me make sure I understand you. So that money that you're talking about, the latter thing you just described, the student allocation is still going to go up, so there really won't be a cut in the amount of money we spend.
So I guess it's how you look at this. So we increase the base student allocation. Yes, that will go up because that's a statute.
And the base student allocation is
a formula funding that every school gets per student.
Per student. And what is that?
You knew you were going to ask me that. It's 5,000 something.
Okay,
I'm just
gotcha.
not sure.
Okay.
I can get you the numbers.
Right, but approximately that's the amount.
Yeah.
Okay.
5,600 and something, I believe.
Right.
And then it will go up $58 this year, and it will go up $58 next year. We forward funded education for 3 years through House Bill 278.
Right.
We also made the decision that $300 million over the next 3 years would be outside the base student allocation to pay for busing, transportation, would pay for increased energy costs.
And how would that be allocated?
That would be the $100 million would be distributed between the 53 school districts,
Depending on population.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So you can see that we did incredible work on the education budget last year. I mean, it really was the focus of our session. We really made some good, positive things. Changes to the education policy. Those are going to continue to ongo when it comes to testing, pushing back against Common Core. Those fundamental strategies will continue, but the funding that I think Governor Walker was talking about was $100 million outside of the base student allocation.
That will not be spent at all.
Correct.
Okay, so that's $100 million cut.
Yes. It's $100 million they won't get. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a cut, Dan. I would
because
say
it's still let's just when you look at it from a flat line bottom zero, they're still getting more money.
They're still getting $58 more based on allocation this year, and they're still getting another increase next year. So it depends on how you look at it. Obviously we have passed HB 278 in good faith that we would make that $100 million appropriation outside of student-based allocation. So, that's to be seen, what will happen. I think Governor Walker's idea was not to spend that money or reduce that amount. There was no specifics, but incredibly bold statement that he made, because you're right. Education has been one of those things that has been tenuous at best. Every session that we've been in the legislature, we as appropriators get criticized anytime we don't fund something the same as we funded last year, or we don't see this increase.
And just so I'm understanding you right, and speaking in generic terms here, we've increased education spending pretty dramatically over the last couple of years. What Mr. Walker has basically proposed last night is we don't increase it as much. There's no real cutting.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on how you look at it.
What we're talking about, I make $50,000 this year. I make $60,000 next year. My boss comes back and says, "No, you're only going to make $58,000." There's no cutting. I'm not going to make less money, but I won't make as much as I thought. So is that scenario basically fit this scenario?
Well, it's hard to talk in generality. So we passed the bill, House Bill 278, with good faith that we would increase outside spend.
I guess the question is this: are we spending any less on education over the next 2 years? Not what we thought we would, but less than we would this year.
Not in the student-based allocation.
And just overall.
Overall, I think if you take House Bill 278 out of the equation, education funding is going to increase.
Gotcha.
Based on the space student allocation.
I got to take a quick break. We'll continue with State Representative Millett. She is with us. We're talking about the governor's state of the budget last night. Also, Dan Sullivan, U.S. Senator, will join us later in the broadcast. 7:14, you're listening to Dan Fagan on KOAN KVNT. All right, 717. Dan Fagan here, broadcasting on KOAN, KVNT, streaming live on danfagan.us. Email me, danfaganshow@icloud.com. 569-1080 if you'd like to call the show. We're talking currently to State Representative Sharice Millett, who's down in Juneau this morning. Anything else stand out to you, Representative Millett, regarding the governor's speech last night? We were talking earlier about talking about cutting some of the education budget. The Medicaid thing, where do you stand on that? The expansion of Medicaid, is that concern you? Or?
Yeah, obviously it concerns me. It's a lot of money. Once Governor Walker talked last night about it being 100% federally paid, and then it steps down the next 4 years to a 90% federal pay, 10% state pay. Even at those amounts, anytime you talk about increasing or starting expanding a new program, comes with great trepidation. I think what we need to do is we need to wait to see what the Medicaid reports come out and say. We have a report coming out, I think, in March on Medicaid expansion. We also I believe the Senate has hired on contract Commissioner Struer, who used to be the last Commissioner of Health and Social Services, to walk us through what Medicaid expansion would look like down the road.
I've been told that the Medicaid plan that the state of Alaska has in place is really a Cadillac plan, where that the patient gets 3 meals a day, free travel, free lodging, not only for them but their spouse too.
I'm not sure. I know we do provide travel, as every other state provides travel for folks that can't get medical treatment where they're located currently. So if someone's out in rural Alaska, right now it's federally paid for. It's 100% paid for under the Indian Health Services program. So folks coming in to go to the Alaska Native Medical Center, they're paid for by federal dollars.
Yeah.
So it's a conversation that we need to have. We need to know, what we're doing to the future budgets when it comes to Medicaid expansion. I'm not an expert on Medicaid expansion. I kind of know enough to, understand that it's going to be an increase anytime we expand a federal program. Mm-hmm. But I think what I'm going to be looking for Commissioner Struer and looking for the report that was commissioned to find out exactly what down the road that means. So, while we would love to expand programs because we all want healthy Alaskans, we have to be careful on what we ask for.
Yeah. Revenue sharing. Now, this is a program that the state takes some money and gives it to different, the villages, to cities. The Anchorage gets revenue sharing.
Yep.
Palmer, all the incorporated areas, and then villages.
Incorporated areas get a portion of revenue sharing through the state, and it sounds like he cut that by, I'm not sure. It happened last night, and so we're still looking.
Right.
Looking
I think
at budget.
It was going to be $3 million less next year over this
3
year.
or 5 million less. Yeah,
right.
I think it was 5 million less. That's like I said, he made some bold statements last night. He touched a lot of things that traditionally have been left off the table. So this governor means business. He's not messing around. He sees, even though he says we're not in crisis mode, we definitely are in crisis mode. We need to cut the budget. $3.5 billion deficit this year. Continuing, if you go down that path, we have $17 billion in savings. We're going to be dipping into either our statutory budget reserve or our constitutional budget reserve in this coming fiscal year.
And what was the percentage of cuts that he wanted his commissioners to make for each department?
I believe, his overall budget cut was 6.5.
Yeah.
He's making an 11% cut to his office.
Right.
He asked his commissioners to make anywhere from a 3.5 to 5%.
Okay.
And then what he did though, and what I heard, was that he asked them to look going forward over the next 4 years what their budget would look like at 25% less.
Right.
That was the thing that I thought was very forward thinking, because he's not just thinking about the short-term budget deficit we're going to have this year. He's looking out in the future. He understands that oil prices may remain, somewhere in the $60 range.
Sure.
And we've been budgeting at $107. So
now, I kind of read, and I don't want to pit you against your fellow legislators, but I kind of read two signals from Dunleavy and Meyer. Kevin Meyer said he was a little disappointed in the cuts. Dunleavy said he wishes Walker would have gone further. Where do you come down on that?
This, for me, Governor Walker has been in office 50-some days. So this is a marathon with the governor. So we've got 4 years with this governor. So him coming out in the state of the state and, having a really good optimistic message, and then coming out with a state of the budget where he actually had some nuts and bolts in his speech, I think that he's on a good path. There's 60 people in the legislature. You're going to find 60 different opinions on what they feel about Governor Walker. Change is difficult. We've been used to Governor Parnell for the last 6 years, so it's an adjustment for everybody. But I am willing to give the governor the opportunity to lead us in the direction that he sees as the best for the state. I mean, the voters voted him in. The election is over. We need to get to work. I will tell you, I'm very concerned about his stance on the gas pipeline.
Oh.
That is one thing that I think you will see our caucus be very cognizant of, the moves that he has made and the moves that he has made going forward. I was disappointed that instead of saying, a pipeline to Nikiski, he said the Tidewater.
I know.
Because we've already set in motion.
I know.
And we already have in statute that the terminus of that gas pipeline will be in Nikiski. I am very serious when I said in our press conference that I would like to see politics stay out of the pipeline process. Once you interject politics into that, it becomes nothing more than a political opportunity to ruin something. This should always be about economics and what's best for the state of Alaska, whether it's Mike Chenault's plan, Mike Hawker's plan, Governor Walker's plan, or my plan. It does not matter. It's about the plan, and it's not about the person.
Well,
so
I
will
agree
be
with you.
hypercritical of that.
No, I agree with you. And I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt on all these other issues, because you're right. If there's one big fear I have about Mr. Walker, it's that he will blow up the progress we've already made and try to get this thing to go through his hometown of Valdez.
And that is an economic driver that will take us into the next century. And that, I think, that we have to understand that as much as we need to cut our budget and we need to get our spending to match our revenues and have a sustainable budget, more than anything, we need to make sure that for our future generations, that gas pipeline is done right.
Well, I'll tell you this, Representative Millett. There's been a couple of major earthquakes in the political landscape of Alaska. I think the first one was when Frank appointed his daughter. I think the second one was when Sarah Palin quit midterm. I think if Bill Walker has the audacity to blow up this plan and insist that it goes to his hometown where he served as a lawyer for many years, I think that would be an earthquake that would be bigger than the Palin or the Murkowski appointment. I just think that he would suffer so much resistance from that it would.
Well, the other thing, Dan, is that Governor Walker still has a lawsuit pending against Point Thompson.
I know.
We cannot go forward with the gas line until that is done. And he made a campaign promise that he would remove or he would drop the lawsuit. And now we've seen him shifting. So causes me pause. So he shifted. He has put the Point Thompson under Byron Malott. He has removed himself, but he also has an AG that he partnered with that their firm had the Point Thompson suit, and so he has to recuse his AG from participating in that. So his promise to drop the Point Thompson lawsuit has not happened. We can't get gas out of Point Thompson until there's no litigation going on that field, and that is crucial. Without a doubt, that is the only place that we're going to get enough gas to fill up that pipeline.
We're talking to State Representative Sharice Millett, who's a majority leader. Has he held a press conference yet?
He is holding one this morning, I believe, at 10:30 or 11. So I'm hoping that the reporters will ask him about that, because that's one of the things that I know that our majority caucus has talked about is try to encourage Governor Walker to talk about his plan with his lawsuit against Point Thompson. If you don't have Point Thompson, you don't have a gas pipeline.
The two questions that have to be asked at this press conference this morning, and I know most of the journalists working in Alaska don't even know about a pipeline, but they've got to ask two questions. One, what you just said, are you going to drop the lawsuit? And two, are you still going to insist, as you did all the way up to Election Day, on 52% ownership of the state pipeline.
Right.
Do you know the answer to that? Do you know if has he answered that yet?
He has not.
Yeah.
He has not. He has
Yeah.
not. And I will give him kudos. One more thing. I know you probably want me off the air, but
Never.
National Guard.
Yeah.
He appointed a special investigator, a retired judge. Her name is escaping me right this second. So that was a good thing. You know, one of the things of the we went through the election and it was just pounded and pounded by the Alaska Dispatch was, you know, this National Guard scandal. We've had, you know, multiple investigations that have found multiple different outcomes. And so the special investigator, I would like to see if there was wrongdoing, absolutely prosecution, absolutely get those people out of there that are causing the problems and doing, you know, sexually harassing, I mean, down to, you know, raping women, raping men. That we cannot tolerate that as a state. Absolutely not.
So you give the governor a passing grade for giving specifics last night. You like some of the things he said, and benefit of the doubt on and everything else, and just hope that he does the right thing on the pipeline. That's where we are with you on the governor.
You know, I thought both of his speeches were fine. You know, I'm just not you know, because we all public speak and content is valuable. So I believe that the governor at day 53 or day 54, he gave the best possible state of the state that he could. I didn't have a lot of details, very optimistic. State of the budget had some nuts and bolts to it. You know, kudos for that. Some I agree, some I don't agree, some I wish I had more. But, you know, again, it's a marathon, not a sprint with this governor. He's here for 4 years, and can't judge him on his whole next 4 years on 2 speeches.
State Representative Sharice Millett, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Dan.
Thank you.
Bye.
Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Okay.
The U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan next here on KOAN KVNT. Dan Fagan, 7:30. All right, 7:35. Good morning to you on a Friday. How about that? Friday. The what is it? The 23rd of June. July. No, January. I'm the goofiest man alive.
Starts with a J.
That's right. I knew it had a J.
The cold one.
19 degrees. It was about 2 degrees yesterday in Anchorage. Now it's 19. Wasilla 18. Palmer 18. Anchorage 19. I already said that. Eagle River 19. Everybody's 19 except for Girdwood. Now, how is this possible? Girdwood 37.
Global warming.
I guess so. Alice Rogoff is right. Our number 569-1080. 569-1080. We're streaming live, danfagan.us. Our good friend Keith Montenach is a mechanic, and he's one you can trust. And he has a great team of mechanics working with him and for him at Specialty Truck and Auto, the very best, the most reliable, the most proficient auto mechanic shop in all of Alaska. Specialty Truck and Auto, good value for your repair dollars, which you'll get at Specialty Truck and Auto. If you live anywhere in South Anchorage, on the lower hillside, upper hillside, he's got a great location for you. Located right across the street from the Long Branch Saloon, right there where Diamond turns into Abbott, right on that curve there. Specialty Truck and Auto. Here's the telephone number. Give him a call. Tell him Dan Fagan sent you, and he will give you a free lollipop. I cannot guarantee the flavor, but you will get a free lollipop if you tell him Dan Fagan sent you. Specialty Truck and Auto, 349-1637. 349-1637. So we're supposed to hear from U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan this morning. He hasn't called, huh? Okay. Well, I'm sure he's going to call.
My eyes are right on the phone.
He's a pretty reliable guy. Well, I'm sure he'll call.
Well, he's on DC time. He might have called a few hours ago.
I hope he realizes the difference between. There's a time change there. Interesting speech last night from Governor Walker. We talked to State Representative Millett about it. Millett. And she had some good comments. She praised him for making some suggestions in the arena of cutting spending. She was not a big fan of the Medicaid expansion. Her big fear, of course, is what is the governor going to do with the pipeline? He said last night that he wants to get a gas pipeline to Tidewater, leaving open the possibility of going down through Valdez, which, of course, would completely blow up the deal that we have with the producers now and the incredible progress that we've made in developing the pipeline and getting it down through Nikiski. So that's a big question mark for us, and we're going to be watching that closely. What's the governor going to do, and how's he going to handle that situation? All right, 569-1080, 569-1080. Let's go to David. David, you're on.
Hey, good morning, Dan. How are you doing?
I'm well.
Just well, huh?
I'm good. It's a Friday. How can you complain? It's beautiful outside. It's snowing. It's warmed up. It's Friday. I've got you on the phone. How can I complain?
The price of oil is up to 120.
Yeah, right.
Well, the governor gave a pretty good speech last night. I was very, very impressed with some of the things he said.
What did you like the best?
Well, I like the part that he said next year is going to be like 25% cut.
Yeah.
I also like the part where he clawed back some money from the education industry.
Yep.
And the part he clawed back was that for extra energy cost and also transportation outside of the student funding formula. And, energy costs have, quote, gone down for the school district probably.
Yes.
They note that in their last quarterly budget update. And also, fuel prices have gone down, so transportation costs should go down as well.
Can you explain something to me?
I don't know.
I watched the speech. I heard him say that he wants to cut education spending by 2.5%.
Right.
I watched the Democrats' press conference following, expecting to see people who were foaming at the mouth, accusing the governor of hating kids. The Democrats said nothing of that. And then I watched the Republican response, Kevin Meyer.
Yeah.
And he actually said he was disappointed in Governor Walker proposing a cut. It's like bizarro world. What's going on, Dave?
Well, I watched both of those responses, and I think the Democrats, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they actually pushed back a little bit on, they wanted to protect education funding, which has been done. You know, the BSA goes up, as Representative Millett said, another $50 per child for the next 2 years. But so I think it's politics. You're trying to be rational about this. And Senator Meyer, I just about fell out of my chair when he said what he said about education cuts. It's like, I don't understand it, but it's probably posturing is what I'm thinking. I'm not sure.
Partisanship?
No, I don't think it's partisanship. I think it's posturing. They get a lot of pressure down there from the Great Alaska Schools group that wants more money and no more outcomes. And they get a lot of pressure from the education industry. I mean, the legislative fly-in, I believe, is the end of this month for Anchorage. So, they'll be flying the school board down there and a bunch of teachers, or not teachers, but staff and the superintendent to lobby for more money. I think maybe they ought to save those airline tickets and stay home.
Sure.
But go ahead. But, he's in, he and this state's in a real box because David Teal, if you know David Teal, the director of legislative finance, he gave a great presentation to the Senate yesterday morning, Senate Finance and House Finance, the same briefing yesterday afternoon. People need to go to the state's website and look at that briefing and all those PowerPoint slides. The one he gave at the end was the hard-to-cut items in the operating budget. Those items add up to just like $3.2 billion.
Yeah.
And that's debt service, which must be paid,
right.
Retirement, which must be paid, and then they have production tax credits, which at this time they have to be paid because it encourages more drilling from the small producers. And then you have Medicaid, which must be paid.
Yeah.
And the last one, there's 5 items. The last of the 5 is the K-12 formula funding. That's all of those add up to $3.2 billion. And at the current price of oil, we can't fund those. So he has to start working, and he wants to expand Medicaid. Yeah. So that's going to increase. So he's going to have to start pulling out of K-12 education.
Well, Dave, I gotta run. I got you. I got Senator Sullivan on the line, but I appreciate you calling and thanks for checking in with us. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
All right, let's go down to assume Washington D.C. U.S. Senator Sullivan. I believe this is the first time we've talked since you've won your election. Congratulations, sir. How are you?
Hey, Dan. How's it going? I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm well. Congratulations on your win.
Hey, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It was a big team effort. That's what I keep saying. That's one thing I learned on the campaign trail. Elections and campaigns are not individual sports or team sports. And, we had a great team, so appreciate that.
Y'all settled in?
No, not at all. Not at all. As a matter of fact, I got to head out this weekend for more Marine Corps training, so I'm back and forth. But it's going well. It's
do you see American Sniper?
Just came out of a meeting with the Secretary of Defense designate Ash Carter, who will be coming in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee for his confirmation hearings, and I'm on that committee. So long discussion with him about the strategic location of Alaska and how critical it is to the country. And
well, I want to ask you about
training.
I got a quick break. It's about a minute and a half break. Can you hang on for just a couple more minutes?
Yeah.
I appreciate it, Senator. We're going to get right back to you. Senator Dan Sullivan, our guest here, calling in from Washington, D.C. And, of course, if you want to talk to the senator, you can do so by calling 569-1080, 569-1080 here on KOAN, KVNT. Streaming live, danfagan.us, danfagan.us, broadcasting on KOAN, KVNT. We'll be back with Senator Dan Sullivan right after this. Time currently 7:44. 746, talking to U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan from Washington, D.C. this morning. Senator, your thoughts on the State of the Union Tuesday night?
Well, look, I was disappointed, right? The president didn't seem to recognize what happened in November and put forward more top-down Washington policies, more taxes. Dan, everybody forgets how much he and the previous Congress raised taxes in Obamacare and other areas, more unsustainable spending, and even, and I'm sure most Alaskans noticed it, he was touting how much federal land he locked up over the last 6 years. So, and then the other thing that, I mentioned after the speech is when he laid out kind of his view of what's going on in the world, ISIS, Iran, Russia, and kind of painted this rosy picture. To me, it was borderline on delusional. I mean, Alaskans know that we got serious national security challenges facing us, and yet we have a president who seems to think things are going great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was hard to listen to, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was hard to listen to. I'll tell you, there was a few. I'm an optimist, so I'm always looking for areas for cooperation. He did talk a lot about our veterans and how we got to take care of them. And one of the things I'm proud of in terms of getting to work here. I'm on the Veterans Affairs Committee, and we've already passed out a bill that I co-sponsored called the Clay Hunt Suicide Prevention Bill. It's named after a Marine who had 2 tours overseas. Sniper ended up committing suicide, and how we need to address that problem. And I've seen that issue pretty close up myself. I lost a Alaska Marine to suicide, and I think for commanders, those kind of things always haunt you. If you could do more.
Did you see the movie American Sniper?
I have not seen it yet. Everybody's talking about it. I'm going to see it soon. But
you didn't know
fantastic.
You didn't know Chris Kyle, did you?
No, I didn't. But I'm sure sad that he was, was not with us anymore. That's for sure.
Yeah. So I know that there's talk about cutting the military more. I read there was a meeting here, I think out in Elmendorf today, maybe about.
Yeah, I read that article already in the paper.
What's going on with that? What's the
well,
future?
Look, I literally I no kidding, walked out of a meeting 10 minutes ago with the Secretary of Defense designee, Ash Carter. And a big part of my discussion with him was laying out, what many people have called the most strategic location in the world, and that's Alaska, and how, his predecessor, Chuck Hagel, announcing with fanfare, almost like proud of it, that we're going to be getting down to a pre-World War II level in terms of the size of the U.S. Army. And I just, in this meeting, said, why would anyone celebrate that? That's not a historical benchmark that we should be proud of. Yeah. We have the best trained force in the world, the best soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines and Coast Guardsmen. And, Alaska needs to be viewed as not only a critical geostrategic location, but probably one of the best places in the world to train. And so I invited the Secretary designee to come up to Alaska, see for it himself. Fortunately, he's been up there. And so, no, we got to work hard together as a community to make sure people recognize how important we are for the national security of the country, and to keep our military sharp-edged and trained. And there's no better place to do it than Alaska. So I'm making that case. And when he has his confirmation here, and you'll see me asking similar questions to him in public.
Talking to Dan Sullivan, U.S. Senator, I see you introduced an amendment, was it yesterday, to disarm the EPA. What's this about?
Well, first, this was the campaign promise, Dan. One of the things I'm trying to do is, go into what I talked to Alaskans about, what I ran on, and starting to focus on it. That's why, as I mentioned, co-sponsored that suicide prevention issue, as I campaigned throughout the state. The veterans issues was a huge issue of mine, and getting on the Veterans Affairs Committee was something I was really focused on doing. But this is, this is about classic EPA overreach. And,
So
EPA is not always the EPA has not always had armed agents.
Yeah, that's new.
It's pretty new, and actually, a young congressman from Tennessee named Al Gore was the one who really pressed the EPA to have armed agents in the mid to late '80s. The Reagan administration was skeptical of it. It got through Congress, and Alaskans know what happened out there in Chicken.
Yeah.
When they raided that mining site, they had guys in body armor, rifles, shotguns, a helicopter.
Pretty scary.
Looked for Clean Water Act violations, found nothing.
Right.
And from my perspective, I want to limit the power and authority of the EPA. Let's start by taking away their rifles. Let's start by, they can still serve warrants, but what they're going to have to do in the future is go to the local sheriff or a federal marshal and say, okay, you got to do this with me. And that'll keep a check on what they do. But it's also, as I told my colleagues here when I introduced this, a broader strategic issue here. I ran on the issue of rolling back the federal government in areas of responsibility it shouldn't be in. And this might seem like a small one, but the EPA doesn't need to have guns.
No.
And so let's roll that back. It'll save money. It'll be much more effective, and it'll be a check. So we'll see. I think I'm going to get a lot of support for it when it's on the floor. And I was proud to put that forward. And I think folks in the interior throughout the state, that was a campaign promise I made, and I wanted to follow through on that commitment.
No, it's a good start. We're talking to State U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan. I was reading there seems to be a kind of a rift in Congress right now between the Republicans on how to deal with Obamacare. Some say gut it, go after it, kill it, destroy it. Some say nickel and dime it to death. Where do you come down on that?
Well, you got this big Supreme Court case coming up, the Burwell case, that might be a big opportunity. That's the case on the state subsidies where the law does not provide for subsidies if it's not a state, for state exchanges only. And the Obama administration, and one of what I think was the classic federal overreach and also disregarding of the rule of law, just ignored that provision of its own law and provided subsidies kind of wherever they felt it like it. So that's going to be in front of the Supreme Court. And I think, we've been having discussions on, I think there's going to be a vote on repealing Obamacare. That's what I ran on. Whether we can get to 60 in the Senate, that would need to be some Democrats who have 54 Republicans here. I'm not sure that's going to happen. But this Burwell case might be an opportunity to look at a very significant reform if we can't repeal and replace. So
if the Supreme
I think that's an important course. I'm not sure it's gettable without any Democratic support, but I do think that there are other areas where you can start going after, say, for example, the employer mandate, the individual mandate, the 30-hour work week. So to me, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. You can go for broad-based reform, and you can also take opportunities to roll back some of the most hurtful measures.
If the Supreme Court does rule that it's illegal, to have these state setups, would that, in essence, kill the legislation?
It's a great question, and I think a lot of people are looking at what that could or would do. And
as a follow-up, then, should we not wait as a state to expand Medicaid? I know the governor has said he's moving toward that end. Should we wait to see what the Supreme Court does before we open up all these new entitlements for all these new Alaskans?
Well, look, the Medicaid expansion, that's obviously a state call. When I was asked about it, I was not supportive because, initially Obamacare, if you remember, mandated Medicaid expansion. And I was one of the attorneys general when I was Alaska's AG who sued on that under the 10th Amendment. And we won. That's one of the silver linings in that Obamacare. That's why states have choices. That's why Governor Walker has a choice. That's why Governor Parnell has a choice. But, one of the things there in that law, it even says, hey, we're going to pay for all of it initially, the feds, And remember, the federal government is an $18 trillion debt itself. And then in the out years, the states are going to have to pay more and more.
Yeah.
And that, to me, was the real frightening prospect that, if the state of Alaska eventually got saddled with a program that was so expensive, particularly in a time of budget austerity that we're feeling right now in Alaska, that's a risky proposition with the federal government that's already broke. So, but I think that this Supreme Court case is going to be important. It's hard to tell what they're going to do, but a lot of people are watching it here.
Hey,
Listen, I'm going to run.
Yeah, hey, do me a favor. Tell my good
Yeah.
friend Amanda Coyne I said hello.
I will.
That was a
I'm
big.
very
That's a good
honored.
pickup.
Amanda is she's as you know, a very, very smart woman, great
Yes.
writer, very strategic thinker. Very honored she can be part of the team.
Yeah, good pickup there.
But I'll see you back
Thanks,
in
Senator.
Alaska soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Take care, Dan.
Appreciate it. That's U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan. 758. All right, welcome back. Dan Fagan here. 6 minutes past 8 o'clock on a Friday morning. Good morning to you, the 23rd of January. Currently 19 degrees in Anchorage, 18 in the Valley, 17 in Palmer. Snow coming down, according to the National Weather Service. Going to continue to snow through today and tonight and tomorrow morning. 13 inches potentially possible on the upper hillside, 6 or 7 inches down here in the bowl and out in the valley. We're broadcasting to you on KOAN, KVNT, streaming live, danfagan.us. I was very impressed with Governor Walker's speech last night. I like the idea of cutting. He seems to be pretty serious about cutting. You know, look, let's just cut to the chase here if we could. The big deal with Governor Walker is the gas pipeline. I think there would probably not be that much difference between what Mr. Walker would have done and Mr. Parnell would have done when it comes to budgets. Clearly, Mr. Walker is anti-Kinnick Arm Bridge, anti-Pebble, anti-school choice, all that stuff. So we would have probably made some progress had we elected Parnell again in those realms. So we'll lose out on all that. But really the big deal is the gas pipeline. It's my personal opinion that Governor Parnell has brought us to a position where we're on the brink of getting it. That's my personal opinion. And I base that on all the activity and all the commitment and the capital that the oil companies are spending to make this project happen. I'm talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. So this is, when the money starts flowing, you know something's serious. Now, Mr. Knight in his speech talked about getting this pipeline built to tide. If he's considering going through Valdez, his hometown, a town in which he's made many millions of dollars working as an attorney for, he'd have to blow up the current deal and start over. He also said during the campaign he wants 52% state ownership, which means the state owns the pipeline. That, again, would blow up the deal. Means we'd have to start over. Now, we don't know. He has a press conference today. Hopefully somebody will ask him. But that's the big deal with this governor, in my opinion. But I give him passing marks on getting serious about cutting some of the budget. Now, I will tell you, when I first heard him say on his speech last night that he was going to cut education 2.5%, I almost fell out of my chair because you just don't do that. The teachers union are so strong and so powerful in this state. You don't say you're going to cut education. So I give great credit for that. But earlier in the broadcast, we had a caller call the show, Todd, who is a teacher, who said, if you're going to fix the fact that we throw gobs and gobs and gobs of cash at the education monopoly in Alaska and get dismal results, you got to do more than just cut spending. You have to bring accountability and competition into the mix. And Mr. Walker, of course, being married to the unions, cannot propose that. And that's the real solution to education reform. Listen to what Todd said earlier in the show.
I'm not exactly sure how this fixes the problem. I mean, I suppose that it could potentially highlight some inefficiencies, and when you just throw more money at an inefficiency, it's easy to cover it up. So, I mean, that's possible, but getting better outcomes, I don't think is necessarily going to result in reducing spending. I mean, just like it won't increase spending. Right now, you know, the public education system is like asking a restaurant to provide meals from, you know, Italian meals, Mexican meals, Chinese meals, Thai meals, all in the same building.
Yeah.
And there's there's a reason why restaurants focus on one type of food.
Right.
And that's not, so the inefficiencies that are created by the system as we have it, with very little choice for parents and students, and very little competition, you can't fix it with money one way or the other, I don't think.
So more money or less money is not really the focus. It's changing the entire structure of education.
Well, yeah, I mean, and unless there's going to be accountability on all parties involved in the process, and
what's the number one? What's the number one impediment? Where does that resistance come from? The accountability resistance.
I think it comes from the teachers union. I think it comes from some parents. I think it comes from administrators. I think there are people in all groups, in all stakeholder groups, that are very vocal that don't want accountability. Teachers and the teachers union, but there are administrators who it's a numbers game for them. They want students to earn credit and they want higher graduation rates, and they will lower expectations to do that, to get their numbers. And you have parents who just want their kids to be successful regardless of how much they're learning.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of stakeholder groups that are, people in every stakeholder group that's responsible for where we're at in education. So how do you fix that? Well, you give people, first of all, you put competition pressure on the provider, on the producer, and you give choice. So
I was giving Walker a lot of credit for even mentioning the idea of cutting education, but what really would have been courageous, in your opinion, is if he had promoted choice and competition and accountability.
I'm not exactly sure how this fixes the problem. I mean, I suppose it could potentially highlight some inefficiencies, and when you
that's a caller from Todd, who's a teacher, earlier in the broadcast, talking about the governor cutting education. And we also talked to State Representative Sharice Millett, and she informed us that it's really not a cut. They've increased education spending so much over the next 2 years. It's a pullback on that, but we're still going to spend more money on education. So there's not going to be less money spent on education. It sounded good on the surface last night. I couldn't believe it when I heard him say it on the floor of the legislature there, Mr. Walker. But in reality, there's more to the story. And that's why when they went to the Democrats last night and the press conference afterwards, you talk about cutting education, the Democrats are going to start foaming at the mouth. And they didn't seem to have a problem with it. So I knew there was something going on. Kevin Myers, Senate President, Republican, he did say he was disappointed in the cuts, which I thought, what is that all about? And so I don't know. It's an interesting scenario down there in Juneau right now with the price of oil, what it is. I think there's an upside to it. Let's shrink this gigantic government. Let's do it. 8:14, Dan Fagan here, broadcasting on KOAN, KVNT. My number 569-1080. 569-1080. So glad you're here on this Friday morning. Stay with us. 8:17 in the morning. Good morning to you on this Friday, the 23rd of January. Dan Fagan broadcasting to you on KOAN, KVNT, streaming live on the internet, danfagan.us. Our number 569-1080. Give us a call on this Friday morning. Anything that's on your mind. Did you see the governor's speech last night? Anything you want to talk about? We'd love to hear from you. 569-1080, 569-1080. Winter weather continues across South Central this morning. Additional snowfall accumulations of 4 to 14 inches are forecast for today. 14 inches, that's a lot. The Matsu Valley will likely see the highest total possible, with again 6 to 14 inches of freshly updated snow. Anchorage could see up to 10 inches more in addition to what we already have today. This storm has apparently settled over us. Is it snowing right now, Brian? Can you see?
Not here.
Not here.
At Midtown.
Maybe it's maybe the storm has left us. But this is according to the National Weather Service. Apparently, this front is apparently supposed to stall over Anchorage. If you're out and about, we'd like to hear from you this morning. Even if you're driving in from the valley, give us the conditions in which you're experiencing. 569-1080. 569-1080. At least let us know if it's snowing where you are, how the conditions are, how the traffic is. 569-1080. A lot of people on the road this morning. Hopefully you left a little early, as the weather is less than perfect. It is pretty, though, isn't it? The snow's so pretty. Well, you know, there's so much going on today. The governor's big speech last night, the governor's big speech on Monday. He's having a press conference today. And there are some things that I really think a lot of people are confused about, especially his position on the gas pipeline and what exactly he wants to do. Does he want to blow up the Parnell plan and stop the progress there and start over? He's kind of been vague on it. He's left the door open. Does he want to abandon his 20 or his 52% ownership of the pipeline, which is really 100% ownership? When you have 52% control, you own the thing. So we'll see. Hopefully he'll get questioned on that today, and we'll know a little bit more about his positions on the pipeline and the cuts. I was encouraged last night to hear him talk about cutting. I know that's what everybody was excited about. Governor Walker was going to be the governor who's going to come in and cut. Mr. Parnell, he wasn't a cutter. Well, in reality, Governor Parnell did a pretty good job the last couple of years cutting. He didn't do much cutting when ACES had all that cash coming in and the Democrats controlled the Senate, and they went crazy. They had a party. So we'll see. We'll see if Mr. Walker lives up to what he campaigned on and whether he actually does cut government. The other big story everybody's talking about is Inflategate or Deflategate. I watched the Tom Brady, Bill Belichick press conferences yesterday. I don't believe him. I don't believe Brady, to be honest with you. Belichick just creeps me out. He just creeps me out. He's kind of just sad and mumbles, and he's just kind of an odd dude. And he's like the guy, you grew up with, get off my lawn, kind of guy. And I don't know how to relate to a guy like that who's so he doesn't seem like there's an ounce of happiness in his being. Something's wrong with the dude. I don't know what it is. So I've never been a Belichick fan. Of course, he has a record of cheating. I don't know that he ordered these balls to be deflated. I think Tom Brady pretty clearly was involved. But, the big picture thing here is, did it affect the game? Of course not. Did it in any way, shape, or form influence who's going to win? No way. Do you say, well, there was an intent to cheat? Do you look at that? Sure. I think that's important. I think it's important that the people that we put on a pedestal in our society and our culture behave properly, because so many people look up to them. And I think it's important that we hold people who, to much is given, much is required. If you're put on this pedestal, having the privilege of playing in the NFL, then if you act in an unbecoming way, I think there should be consequences to that. Even if the consequences of your actions are minimal, your intent is what's really important. And I saw who's the guy who used to play quarterback for Jacksonville, Mark Brunell, quarterback, and he talked about the process that a quarterback goes through and how the balls that the quarterback uses. It's an intimate process that when he would play, he would literally take every ball and hold it and feel it and say, yeah, this was good, this was good. And he said they'd even practice with the same balls 3 days in a row to kind of get some wear and tear on them. And for Brady to say that he had no relationship with the condition of the balls, Brunell said it's just unbelievable. And I didn't, I'm no expert on who's lying and who's not, but I didn't really sense that Mr. Brady was telling the truth. That's just, I have no way of knowing that, just a suspicion. And, Brady kind of put it in perspective, though. He said, this is not about ISIS. People aren't dying. And that is true. And look, the big one, who's the big winner here? ESPN, the media. People are, I'll tell you right now, yesterday, 4 or 5 times, I went on ESPN.com for one reason. What's new on Deflategate? What's happening now? What are the new findings? I would imagine ESPN's traffic to their website has gone up 40% since this so-called scandal broke out. So it is in their best interest. It's in the media's best interest. Frankly, it's in my best interest to talk about it because everybody's talking about it and to keep the thing alive and to keep it going. It is disappointing, though, if it is true. You think about, you hear these stories. But let's look at people, ladies and gentlemen, who literally grow up in the worst part of town. Their mother's on drugs, their father left, and yet somehow, some way, they find a way to pull themselves up against all odds and make something of themselves and become something in life. All the opposition that they face, all the heartache and hardship they battled to get to where they are in life. And then you get someone who's an athlete, who's coddled, who's given tutors, who's given free college education. And literally their path in life is so much easier because they have a God-given talent and ability. They have good hand-to-eye coordination. They are athletic. I mean, when you talk about an athlete at the level of a Tom Brady, quarterback at Michigan, he had a pretty charmed life. Now, granted, he's a good athlete. He's a great athlete. He's one of the best of all times to play his position. But look at all of the benefits he had in life compared to someone who maybe didn't have that super athletic ability and had to fight for everything he or she got. And yet, so here Tom Brady gets to the very top, the pinnacle of his profession, and he's going to cut a corner. Come on. That's a complete loss of perspective. And that's why I think gratitude is so important. Wherever it is you get in life, whatever it is you've overcome, however it is you overcame and defeated the shortcomings that you have in your life and the battles and the opposition you faced, to live in that place of gratitude. Thank God I'm here. Thank God that the good in my life that has happened. And you live in that place, it keeps you from, I gotta have more. I gotta have more. I gotta have more. I gotta have more. Gratitude and contentment are such big parts of life. I really believe that. And if Mr. Brady would have said, and this is assuming he's guilty, I don't know. I can't imagine how there's any way you could believe otherwise, but that's just my opinion. But assuming he's guilty, let's say hypothetically, how could you get to the place where you have a beautiful model wife paid tens of millions of dollars a year? You're a star. You're a good-looking dude. You got everything in the world going for you. And you're not content. You got to go for more, even if it means breaking the rules. What a loss of perspective. But it's a lesson for all of us, I think. I lose perspective all the time, and it causes me to do things I shouldn't do. Assuming Mr. Brady's guilty here. Contentment and gratitude. It's such a big deal. There's such big deals. Just to rest in that. Just to rest in the fact that you have your health. You have a job. you live in the greatest country since the beginning of mankind. That you have your freedom. You know, there's still a lot of people on this planet who are not free. That you can go stand on the street corner and say, I think Mr. Obama is a bad president, or I think John Boehner is a bad Speaker of the House. So many things to be grateful for. And when we live in that place of gratitude, I don't think you can mess up. I don't think it's possible. I honestly don't. You can't complain. You can't feel sorry for yourself. You can't have self-pity. And I don't really think you can make bad decisions when you live in a place of gratitude. I really don't. If you're grateful, you're not gonna do something immoral or wrong because you want to get more or get more ahead or impress people. Because you're grateful. You live in that place of gratitude. That's just a big deal. It is for me. My times in my life when I've had seasons of success and making good choices, it's because I have made sure that my heart remained grateful. And the times that I've made bad decisions in my life, which by the way are many, it's because I lost perspective and I lost focus on how important it is to be grateful and to have a heart of gratitude. You know how when you go on a vacation and you're a kid and your dad, he tries so hard to make the vacation fun, and he's just doing his best, and you're just complaining because you're a brat. To me, that's kind of like adults when we don't live in that heart of gratitude. You know, here God creates this beautiful, gorgeous planet for us to live in for our pleasure, by the way. And all we're doing is just complaining and whining. That's the key to life for me, in my opinion. It's just one of the keys. It's a big one for me, personally. It's speaking from experience. 829, Dan Fagan here on KOAN, KVNT, our number 569-1080, 569-1080. Well, good morning. 8:35 here on a Friday morning. You made it to Friday. Congratulations. 23rd of January. 19 right now in Anchorage, 18 Wasilla, 18 Palmer, 19 Eagle River, 37 in Girdwood. Our number 569-1080. We're going to hear from U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan in a minute. Former NFL players are now beginning to speak out on Deflategate. Mark Brunell said those balls were deflated. Someone had to do it. I don't believe there's an equipment manager in the NFL that would on his own initiate deflate a ball without a starting quarterback's approval. I just don't believe what Tom Brady had to say. Jerome Bettis, former running back, says, I'm so disappointed because I thought this was a perfect opportunity for Tom Brady to go and say, you know what, I made a mistake. I blew it. It's on me. I'll take the blame here, and this will go away. He didn't do that. I'm disappointed in you, Tom Brady. Former ESPN analyst Brian Dawkins said it was unbelievable for Brady not to be aware when he touched the balls every play. Hall of Fame quarterback Troy Aikman agreed, said the balls would not be altered unless Brady had instructed an equipment manager to do so. Here's what Aikman said. It's obvious that Tom Brady was behind this. This is all yesterday after Brady and Belichick denied it. Aikman said, for the balls to be deflated, that doesn't happen unless the quarterback wants that to happen. I can assure you of that. Now the question becomes, did Belichick know about it? Incredibly, the already tarnished Belichick left his press conference earlier in the day with more plausible deniability, particularly to quarterbacks familiar with the ball-picking process. Matt Leinart, 8-year pro, said, I listened to Bill Belichick and I believed every word he said. Not once did a head coach ever have to put any input in that. It's strictly a quarterback to equipment manager thing, and that's pretty universal. Those are the only two guys that have part of the process. Leinart went on to say, you go through the whole bag and you literally handpick them and say, this one is good, this one is too hard. Put a little bit of air in this one, take a little bit out. It's full 20-minute process every time, every game. And you make sure on Sunday you have the exact football you want to be throwing. Quarterbacks are very, very picky about how they want their balls, and that goes on everywhere. Ravens defensive end Chris Canty, whose team lost to the Patriots, thinks it's just another example of New England's willingness to do anything to gain an unfair advantage. Canty said the Patriots are habitual line steppers. He says you're talking about attacking the integrity of our game, and that bothers me.
It sounds like they're guilty till proven innocent.
Well, there's 11 balls deflated.
But they don't know who did it. They can't prove it.
Well, of course you can't prove it, but I mean, you think the equipment manager did it on his own and that Brady didn't check the balls?
I still think it was a spy from the other team.
Canty went on to say, what I'm going to say about the deflating of the balls, to me, there's no difference than performance-enhancing drugs. You're cheating at that point. You're getting a competitive advantage outside of the rule book, and there has to be some sort of consequences for that. Troy Aikman thinks the consequences should be harsher than the suspensions handed down to the Saints for Bountygate. Aikman said Sean Payton did not cheat. There was nothing that Sean Payton and the Saints did that was illegal. And they did not give themselves a competitive edge. Now twice under Bill Belichick and possibly a third time, they've cheated and given themselves an advantage. To me, Aikman said, the punishment for the Patriots and or Bill Belichick has to be more severe than what the punishment for the New Orleans Saints. And, of course, you remember the Saints, Sean Payton was suspended for an entire year. He could not coach. Just disappointing. As I said earlier, really, Tom Brady? Is there anyone on the planet who had more going for him? Honestly? It's disappointing. What do? I hope it's not true. And again, the perspective that I come at this from is because this is something I've lived personally as a kid, man. I'm telling you, the New Orleans Saints, and maybe I was the only kid like this, but I was just Archie Manning. Are you kidding me? He's our quarterback. He was a god to me. You know, we TV'd come on at night. We get the sports section couldn't wait. You know, something about the Saints. What's going on with the Saints? Following every minute of it. Of course, now these days with ESPN and sports talk, it's all that's on, and they're constantly talking about it. And kids really get involved in their athletics. I suppose it's important that the parents teach the child that, you know, don't look up to your athletes to the point where they're flawless, and everybody has problems. And maybe that's the lesson here. Everybody makes mistakes. Not everybody does the right thing every time, and maybe that's the good side of this. Maybe that was my problem as a kid, as I idolized these athletes so much I didn't realize that, you know, they're just like anybody else. We all put our pants on one leg at a time, and sometimes, myself included, we make bad decisions. I've made many. It's just disappointing. I guess the thing that is important here is that, you know, come clean. You know, anytime I hear who was it? It was somebody. There's a guy at New York, head of New York, the state senate there in New York. They caught him, man. They caught him on tape. He's going down. Was arrested yesterday. They put him in handcuffs. Widespread corruption. Buku evidence. He took bribe after bribe after bribe after bribe. He holds a press conference and says, I'm innocent. I'll be exonerated. It's ridiculous. It's like Marion Barry when they caught him smoking crack on videotape. This guy, they got him dead to rights. And I remember thinking to myself, there is no worse position to be in than when you've done something wrong and you won't come clean about it. And I've been in that position. I've been in that position where I've done something I shouldn't have done. And it isn't until I come clean on it and say, you know what, I should have done that, that you feel like a human being again. And so I guess that's really the big thing here too for Tom Brady. For his sake, yeah, okay, we deflated the balls. It was a stupid thing to do. I'm sorry. I'd forgive him. I frankly wouldn't even look down on him anymore. I wouldn't look down at him because everybody makes mistakes. That's the one thing about life that is certain. I don't care who you are. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make decisions, and you're going to make bad decisions. Every single one of us. It's you know, a lot of times where you determine the makeup of the person is what do you do with your mistakes, not what mistakes you make. Do you clean up your mess? Do you come clean? That's really the mark of a good man or not. Because we're all going to make mistakes. Every one of us. So this could be a win-win for everybody. It could be a win-win for the NFL. It could be a win-win for Tom Brady. I guarantee you, if he simply came clean and said, this is assuming he was involved, which it's just hard to believe he wasn't. Hey, you know what, guys, I messed up. I apologize to my teammates. I apologize to the Colts. I apologize to the fans. And I'm going to try to be better. Man, I'll tell you, I would think the world of the guy. Because he's just like the rest of us, right? 569-1080. We're going to hear from U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan coming up. Snowy today. 16 inches possible out in the valley. 10 here in Anchorage. Time currently 8:44. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. Dan Fagan here on KOAN, KVNT. It's 8:47 in the morning, 19 degrees in Anchorage, 18 in the Valley, 19 in Eagle River, 37 in Girdwood. Snow throughout the rest of the day into Saturday morning, up to 16 inches out in the Valley, 10 inches here in Anchorage today, in addition to what we've already got. We talked to U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan a little bit earlier in the broadcast. Here's some of that. Senator, your thoughts on the State of the Union Tuesday night?
Well, look, I was disappointed, right? The president didn't seem to recognize what happened in November and put forward more top-down Washington policies, more taxes. Dan, everybody forgets how much he and the previous Congress raised taxes in Obamacare and other areas. More unsustainable spending, and I'm sure most Alaskans noticed it, he was touting how much federal land he locked up over the last 6 years. So, and then the other thing that, I mentioned after the speech is when he laid out kind of his view of what's going on in the world, ISIS, Iran, Russia, and kind of painted this rosy picture. To me, it was borderline on delusional. I mean, Alaskans know that we got serious national security challenges facing us, and yet we have a president who seems to think things are going great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was hard to listen to, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was hard to listen to. I'll tell you, there was a few. I'm an optimist, so I'm always looking for areas for cooperation. He did talk a lot about our veterans and how we got to take care of them. And, one of the things I'm proud of in terms of getting to work here, I'm on the Veterans Affairs Committee, and we've already passed out a bill that I co-sponsored called the Clay Hunt Suicide Prevention Bill. It's named after a Marine who had 2 tours overseas, sniper, ended up committing suicide, and how we need to address that problem. And I've seen that issue pretty close up myself. I've lost an Alaska Marine to suicide, and I think for commanders, those kind of things always haunt you. If you could do more.
Did you see the movie American Sniper?
I have not seen it yet. Everybody's talking about it. I'm going to see it soon. But
you didn't know
fantastic.
You didn't know Chris Kyle, did you?
No, I didn't. I'm sure sad that he was, was not with us anymore. That's for sure.
Yeah. So I know that there's talk about, cutting the military more. I read there was a meeting here, I think out in Elmendorf today, maybe about.
Yeah, I read that article already in the paper.
What's going on with that? What's the
well,
future?
Look, I literally I no kidding, walked out of a meeting 10 minutes ago with the Secretary of Defense designee, Ash Carter. And a big part of my discussion with him was laying out, what many people have called the most strategic location in the world, and that's Alaska, and how, his predecessor, Chuck Hagel, announcing with fanfare, almost like proud of it, that we're going to be getting down to a pre-World War II level in terms of the size of the U.S. Army. And I just in this meeting said, why would anyone celebrate that? That's not a historical benchmark that we should be proud of. Yeah. We have the best trained force in the world, the best soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines and Coast Guardsmen. And, Alaska needs to be viewed as not only a critical geostrategic location, but probably one of the best places in the world to train. And so I invited the Secretary designee to come up to Alaska, see for it himself. Fortunately, he's been up there. And so, no, we got to work hard together as a community to make sure people recognize how important we are for the national security of the country, and to keep our military sharp-edged and trained. And there's no better place to do it than Alaska. So I'm making that case. And when he has his confirmation here, and you'll see me asking similar questions to him in public.
Talking to Dan Sullivan, U.S. Senator, I see you introduced an amendment, was it yesterday, to disarm the EPA. What's this about?
Well, first, this was the campaign promise, Dan. One of the things I'm trying to do is, go into what I talked to Alaskans about, what I ran on, and starting to focus on it. That's why, as I mentioned, co-sponsored that suicide prevention issue, you know, as I campaigned throughout the state. The veterans issues was a huge issue of mine, and getting on the Veterans Affairs Committee was something I was really focused on doing. But this is, this is about classic EPA overreach, and
so
EPA is not always had armed agents.
That's new.
It's pretty new, and actually, a young congressman from Tennessee named Al Gore was one who really pressed the EPA to have armed agents in the mid to late 80s. The Reagan administration was skeptical of it. It got through Congress, and Alaskans know what happened out there. Helicopter,
pretty scary.
Look for Clean Water Act violations, found nothing.
Right.
And from my perspective, I want to limit the power and authority of the EPA. Let's start by taking away their rifles. Let's start by, they can still serve warrants, but what they're going to have to do in the future is go to the local sheriff or a federal marshal and say, okay, you got to do this with me. And that'll keep a check on what they do. But it's also, as I told my colleagues here when I introduced this, a broader strategic issue here. I ran on the issue of rolling back the federal government in areas of responsibility it shouldn't be in. And this might seem like a small one, but the EPA doesn't need to have guns.
No.
And so let's roll that back. It'll save money. It'll be much more effective. And it'll be a check. So we'll see. I think I'm going to get a lot of support for it when it's on the floor. And, I was proud to put that forward. And I think folks in the interior throughout the state, that was a campaign promise I made, and I wanted to follow through on that commitment.
It's a good start. We're talking to State U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan. I was reading there seems to be a kind of a rift in Congress right now between the Republicans on how to deal with Obamacare. Some say gut it, go after it, kill it, destroy it. Some say nickel and dime it to death. Where do you come down on that?
Well, you got this big Supreme Court case coming up, the Burwell case, that might be a big opportunity. That's the case on the state subsidies where the law does not provide for subsidies if it's not a state, for state exchanges only. And the Obama administration, and one of what I think was the classic federal overreach, and also disregarding of the rule of law, just ignored that provision of its own law and provided subsidies kind of wherever they felt it like it. So that's going to be in front of the Supreme Court. And I think, we've been having discussions on, I think there's going to be a vote on repealing Obamacare. That's what I ran on. Whether we can get to 60 in the Senate, that would need to be some Democrats who have 54 Republicans here. I'm not sure that's going to happen. But this Burwell case might be an opportunity to look at a very significant reform if we can't repeal and replace. So
if the Supreme Court,
I think that's an important course. I'm not sure it's gettable without any Democratic support, but I do think that there are other areas where you can start going after, say, for example, the employer mandate, the individual mandate, the 30-hour work week. So to me, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. You can go for broad-based reform, and you can also take opportunities to roll back some of the most hurtful measures.
If the Supreme Court does rule that it's illegal, to have these state setups, would that, in essence, kill the legislation?
It's a great question, and I think a lot of people are looking at what that could or would do. And
as a follow-up, then, should we not wait as a state to expand Medicaid? I know the governor has said he's moving toward that end. Should we wait to see what the Supreme Court does before we open up all these new entitlements for all these new Alaskans?
Well, look, the Medicaid expansion, that's obviously a state call. When I was asked about it, I was not supportive because, initially Obamacare, if you remember, mandated Medicaid expansion. And I was one of the attorneys general when I was Alaska's AG who sued on that under the 10th Amendment. And we won. That's one of the silver linings in that Obamacare. That's why states have choices. That's why Governor Walker has a choice. That's why Governor Parnell has a choice. But, you know, one of the things there in that law, it even says, hey, we're going to pay for all of it initially, the Fed. And remember, the federal government is an $18 trillion debt itself. And then in the out years, the states are going to have to pay more and more.
Yeah.
And that, to me, was the real frightening prospect that, you know, if the state of Alaska eventually got saddled with a program that was so expensive, particularly in a time of budget austerity that we're feeling right now in Alaska, that's a risky proposition with the federal government that's already broke. So, but I think that this Supreme Court case is going to be important. It's hard to tell what they're going to do, but a lot of people are watching it here.
Tell my good friend Amanda Coyne I said hello.
I will.
That's a good pickup.
Amanda is she's as you know, a very, very smart woman, great writer, you know, very strategic thinker. I'm very honored to be part of the team.
Yeah, good pickup there.
I'll see you back
in
Alaska soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Take care, Dan.
Senator, your thoughts on the State of the Union Tuesday night?